Rated M for mature.
Hi, I'm Ben Fisher, Head of Design at Rebellion, and I'm here to talk to you about Zombie Army VR. Zombie Army as a franchise is a perfect fit for VR. Killing zombies in VR is always great fun because they're coming straight for your face. But Zombie Army is a game about taking its time, about choosing every shot very, very carefully. That really puts the pressure on you in VR. The most obvious change to the Zombie Army experience in VR is the immersion of reloading your gun under pressure, having those hordes of zombies coming at you slowly and not panicking and not flubbing a shot. It adds a load of texture, it's great fun. We've also added dual wielding on top of that. So you've got that moment where you choose, do I take the time to reload this, shoot with this gun here, drop this one and pull this one out and try and take the zombies out? It really adds dimensions to that moment of pressure as they approach. We've translated a load of the mechanics from the Zombie Army series to make them more native to the VR experience. The most obvious being manually aiming down the sights to take down the zombies, adding more texture to the reload mechanics of the game, whether that's clipping in your ammo, pulling the bolt, or flicking a shotgun shot. There's also tension in the moments where you're trying to make your way through the environment and survive against approaching zombies. Now you interact manually with the environment to open the way and survive. Medkits are much more immersive. You inject them into yourself to boost your health. And finally, melee combat, where you can pick up environmental objects and use them to smash the zombie hordes. VR environments are usually much more small, intense, and immersive, so you focus on those close details, you focus on world building at a close distance. In the earlier Zombie Army games, you would be taking on a horde of up to 80 zombies at a time. You get the same emotional experience by taking out a smaller number with the added pressure of that closeness and that immersion. Zombie Army VR takes place between the Zombie Army Trilogy series and Zombie Army 4. It goes into the details of what happened to some of the characters that you didn't see in 4 that you may remember from Zombie Trilogy. It's a standalone story that's perfectly easy to understand if you're not familiar with either. You play as one of 4 Deadhunters helping Hermann Wolff defend a resistance base, and you gradually uncover mysteries showing a greater force amassing in the Nuremberg castle. So the game is set in classic Zombie Army style locations, so war-torn rural areas, occult Nazi bunkers, and some other mysterious, even more otherworldly occult locations. Zombie Army VR is an experience that's only possible in VR. The sense of closeness, of immersion, of being surrounded by zombies as they approach from front and behind, doubles down on some of the most visceral and intense experience of the Zombie Army universe. One of the main challenges in translating Zombie Army to VR was making sure we maintained that sense of intensity, of being overwhelmed by enemy forces, but in a VR native fashion. What we found is that so much of the player's attention goes into the act of reloading and of awareness of where the enemies are, that having a smaller number coming at you closely and intensely is a much better balance. We also brought back some of the key special zombies from Zombie Army Trilogy, Zombie Army 4. Armoured Giants and snipers being special zombies that you really have to pay attention to and manage much more carefully than the standard horde. Balancing a VR game is very similar to a sort of traditional flat game, but different in a couple of key ways. You're always considering what the player can see on screen, where their attention is, how intense they might be feeling, how calm they might be feeling, and all of this applies in VR as well. But because it's such an intimate experience, those are much more heightened, so the player's ability to pay attention to where zombies can be approaching from, to track the next location, is much more intense and much more visceral. So it means that every single piece of tuning and balancing is critical. Zombie Army VR is a very intense experience, and that's what makes it so much fun. The closeness of the zombies as they approach and as they overwhelm your view really brings the game to life. It also adds a dimension to things like the kill cam. The bullet penetrate the zombie and the blood spray through the air. It's a key moment in Zombie Army as a franchise, and it adds a whole load of texture to do it in VR. The The score system in Zombie Army VR is inspired heavily by the system found in Zombie 4. It's a great fit. The player is given extra points for skilled shots, for combos and multipliers to take out the zombie hordes. The player also has a score that competes with their co-op buddy to see who's performing the best. The player can also unlock weapon customizations as they progress, much like Zombie 4, add a scope to their rifle, increase the amount of ammunition they can carry on a gun to improve their chances against the zombie horde as they progress through the game. The entire campaign is playable in online co-op with a friend. You can give each other hand signals to indicate what to do next. You can throw each other supplies, and you can coordinate to take out the zombie threats. Zombie Army VR retains the classic 80s horror vibes of the rest of the franchise, with the same soupy, colourful fogs, broad, pulpy, energetic storytelling tone, an all-new soundtrack that builds on the same tones found in Zombie Trilogy and Zombie 4. So the player will be very, very familiar with the atmosphere they find themselves in. For long-standing fans, it will be a great opportunity to find out what happened to Hermann Wolff between Zombie Army Trilogy and Zombie Army 4.
I'm Richard Turner, I'm Head of Art at Rebellion, and I've been working on Zombie Army VR. I think that a zombie game in VR has all of those immersive elements to it, right? You are up close and personal with the zombie. You can see the muscles and the sinew and the gore, and I think that's just another level from having it as 2 feet away from you on a PC with a keyboard. Creating our assets for a VR game is actually really difficult. We have to ask the artists to create assets of really high fidelity, but also to manage the performance of the hardware that they have to build their assets for. Zombie Army is an incredibly realistic looking game, so we have to be super careful about making sure that we curate the scene around the player's viewpoint. So everywhere that you go, wherever the camera can be, is where we focus the most amount of our asset fidelity and focus. The Zombie Army franchise already has a strong visual identity. It has a grindhouse, a cult, pentagram, dark forces, all wrapped in this arcade body. I think the first starting point was just to bring the franchise onto the platform and then start to work through what are the VR elements, what's the immersion that the players need to have. I remember a moment where I realized the game was getting really good, and I was playing one of the earlier levels. There were swarms of zombies coming around me. It was a crazy experience. I was fumbling everywhere trying to reload my gun, and I was panicking. And at that moment, I knew we had a pretty good game under our belts. So the game does evolve in response to the story. As the players move through the game, they'll become more and more aware of the void, which is an alternative reality. There's a great level in the game where we visit a prison where it's intact, and later we revisit that prison in a completely different form. Imagine it as a Rubik's Cube, and then you've messed that up. And so at one point I'm walking on the floor, and then in another moment I'm walking on the ceiling looking at where I just came from. And that is a pretty cool space to be. I think artists should be designers first and artists second. We aren't just making art for the sake of it. Artists need to create assets for clear visual gameplay communication. A great example of this is actually the lighting. Artists want to always create spaces that are beautiful and clean and dramatic, but actually what they need to do is consider the gameplay of those spaces. The artists want to light the space in a really dark and grungy way, but what we need to do is make sure that the gameplay is always facilitated in that space, that it's navigable and your orientation is never lost so that you can progress through the game. Zombie Army VR is like Space Invaders with zombies. Our biggest challenge is a sheer number of zombies. They are falling off cliffs, they are coming towards you at speed, they are raising through the grills in the floor. We had to make a lot of consideration to making sure those characters were believable and scary, whilst also being optimal for the platform. I want players that play Zombie Army VR to be panicked. I want them to feel stressed about the situation they're in. I want them to fumble around with their weapons, have to run around and find more ammo. I want that panic and that horror to be real to them, because that's what I felt and I really loved it.
Oh well, and then for fans old and new alike, I hope everyone will enjoy the experience of that visceral intensity of taking out Nazi zombie hordes.